The Willowbrook Estates Community Center buzzed with nervous energy. Word had spread through the neighborhood that Karen Middleton would be attending the board meeting, and curiosity had drawn a crowd nearly as large as the one that had witnessed her removal. Karen sat in the back row, a manila folder on her lap, watching Janet Mueller call the meeting to order with the confidence of someone who believed she'd already won. Tonight's agenda includes the appointment of a new HOA president, Janet announced, her voice carrying across the packed room. I'm pleased to nominate Robert Chen for the position. Murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd. Robert was well-liked, reasonable, and most importantly, not Karen Middleton. Before we vote, Karen said, standing slowly, I have some information the board might find relevant. The room fell silent. Janet's face went pale, but she maintained her composure. Mrs. Middleton, you're no longer a member of this board. You don't have speaking privileges. I'm not speaking as a board member, Karen replied, walking toward the front. I'm speaking as a concerned citizen who's discovered evidence of financial crimes. She opened the manila folder and pulled out a stack of documents. Over the past 2 years, approximately $40,000 has been stolen from the HOA maintenance fund through fraudulent invoices and fake companies. The silence was deafening. Karen could see Dave in the middle of the room, his face a mixture of surprise and concern. That's a serious accusation, said board member Jennifer Walsh. Do you have proof? I have invoices for $23,000 paid to Verdi Solutions, a company that doesn't exist, Karen said, holding up the documents. The registered address for this fake company is 847 Maple Street, Janet Mueller's home. Janet shot to her feet. This is harassment. You're trying to get revenge because you were removed from the board. I have bank records showing the payments. Karen continued calmly. I have incorporation documents showing no business by that name exists. And I have testimony from the management company's accountant who's been flagging these discrepancies for months. She turned to face the crowd. I was wrong about a lot of things. I was wrong to harass my neighbors over minor violations. I was wrong to trespass on private property. I was wrong to put my obsession with rules above my relationships with the people I was supposed to serve. Her voice cracked slightly. But I was right about one thing. This community deserves better. It deserves leaders who protect its interests, not steal from its treasury. Marcus Webb stood up from the middle of the room. I second everything Karen just said. I have additional financial records that show the pattern of theft going back 18 months. Janet was backing toward the exit, but Robert Chen blocked her path. Janet, is this true? Karen Middleton stood waist-deep in her neighbor's pool at 7:23 a.m. on a Tuesday, clutching a plastic bucket like a weapon. When Officer Martinez stepped onto the deck, his hand instinctively moving toward his radio, Karen didn't hesitate. She hurled the bucket's contents, 3 gallons of chlorinated water, directly at his uniform. Ma'am, you me too, Martinez sputtered, water dripping from his badge. I need to weigh a Karen's voice cracked like a whip. Obey some trumped-up HOA fascists? I don't think so. The whole mess had started 6 months ago when Karen was elected HOA president by a margin of 3 votes. She'd run on a platform of restoring neighborhood standards. But somewhere between filing her first violation notice and installing security cameras on her own property, Karen had transformed from concerned citizen to something far more dangerous. The Henderson's pool was her current obsession. According to HOA bylaws section 4.72, pools must be maintained in a state of cleanliness and proper chemical balance. Karen had been testing their water daily, without permission, for 2 weeks. The pH is 7.8, she shrieked at Officer Martinez, who was now radioing for backup. The acceptable range is 7.2 to 7.6. They're creating a public health hazard. Ma'am, you're trespassing, Martinez said, pulling out his handcuffs. And you just assaulted a police officer. Karen's eyes blazed. I'm protecting property values. Do you know what happens to a neighborhood when people start letting their pools go to hell? Mrs. Henderson appeared at her sliding glass door, coffee mug in hand, watching the scene unfold with the detached fascination of someone observing a nature documentary. Her husband Jim was already on the phone with their lawyer. Karen, honey. Mrs. Henderson called out sweetly. You know you're not supposed to be in our backyard without permission. Permission? Karen waded toward the pool's edge, her designer pantsuit clinging to her legs. I'm the HOA president. I have a duty to inspect. You have a duty to follow the law, Martinez said. But Karen was already climbing out of the pool, water cascading from her clothes. She stood there dripping, mascara running in dark streaks down her cheeks, and for a moment, something flickered in her eyes, a brief recognition of how far she'd fallen. But then she spotted the Hendersons' new patio furniture, clearly not the approved neutral tones listed in the community guidelines. And another thing, she began, pointing a wet finger at the offending wicker chairs. That's when Officer Martinez's backup arrived, and Karen's morning took another turn for the worse. As the second patrol car pulled up, Karen made a decision that would define the next phase of her war against neighborhood chaos. She wasn't going down without a fight. You want to arrest me? She asked, pulling out her phone. Fine, but I'm live streaming this whole thing. Let's see how the community feels about police harassment of elected officials. She hit go live on Facebook just as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. The Willowbrook Estates Community Center had never hosted a crowd like this. Every folding chair was occupied, and people lined the walls 3 deep, smartphones recording every moment. Karen Middleton sat alone at the front table, facing the 5-member HOA board like a defendant at trial. Board Secretary Janet Mueller cleared her throat. This emergency meeting is called to order. We're here to discuss the conduct of President Karen Middleton and determine if removal proceedings should begin. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Karen had arrived early, having made bail that afternoon, and spent an hour setting up her defense materials. Printed emails, violation notices, and a thick binder of community guidelines. She changed into her most professional outfit, a navy blazer and pearls. But the fight had gone out of her clothes. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. I'd like to address the board, Karen said, standing slowly. Karen, said board member Robert Chen, no relation to her lawyer. Maybe you should let your attorney speak first. I don't need anyone to speak for me, Karen replied, though her voice cracked slightly. I've been speaking for this community for 6 months. I'm not going to stop now. She turned to face the crowd. In the front row sat the Hendersons, the Pattles, and a dozen other neighbors she'd cited for violations. Their faces ranged from angry to sympathetic to simply curious. You all know me, Karen began. I've lived here for 15 years. I've organized your block parties, managed your holiday decorations, and yes, I've enforced the rules that keep this neighborhood beautiful. By trespassing and assaulting police officers, called out Tom Peterson from the back. Karen's jaw tightened. By doing what needed to be done when no one else would step up. She launched into her prepared speech about property values and community standards, but even as she spoke, she could see the faces in the crowd. Mrs. Chen from the corner house, whose grandson visited every weekend and left chalk drawings on the sidewalk, drawings Karen had once demanded be power washed away. The Johnsons, whose teenage daughter had been saving for college by walking neighborhood dogs. A business Karen had tried to shut down for violating the no commercial activity clause. I've made mistakes, Karen said, her voice barely above a whisper. The crowd leaned forward. But everything I did was to protect what we all love about this place. By terrorizing your neighbors? This from Sarah Martinez, Officer Martinez's wife, who lived 2 streets over. My husband came home soaked and humiliated. For what? Pool chemicals. Karen felt something break inside her chest. I was trying to help. Help who? Asked Dave Middleton from the back of the room. Karen spun around, shocked. Her husband stood near the exit, arms crossed, his face unreadable. Dave, she whispered. I'm here to support the removal proceedings, he said, and the room fell silent. My wife needs professional help, and she's not going to get it as long as she has this position to hide behind. The betrayal hit Karen like a physical blow. She gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. You don't understand, she said to the room, to Dave, to anyone who would listen. If we don't maintain standards, if we don't enforce the rules, everything falls apart. The property values, the community spirit, The what, Karen? Dave's voice was gentle but firm. The neighborhood was fine before you declared war on it. Board member Jennifer Walsh spoke up. Karen, we appreciate your dedication. But 6 months of violations, threats, and now criminal charges. We have to think about the community's liability. I move for immediate removal, said Robert Chen. Seconded, said Janet Mueller. The vote was unanimous, 5-0. Karen sat down heavily, the sound of her chair scraping against the floor echoing in the sudden silence. She'd lost everything, her position, her crusade, her marriage, in the span of 24 hours. But as she gathered her materials with shaking hands, she caught sight of something that made her pause. In the back corner, partially hidden behind a support pillar, stood Marcus Webb, the one board member who'd been absent from tonight's vote. He was filming everything on his phone, and when their eyes met, he gave her the slightest nod before slipping out the emergency exit. Karen had no idea what Marcus was planning, but for the first time all day, she felt a flicker of hope. Karen's kitchen table looked like a war room. Scattered across its surface were property deeds, municipal codes, and a laptop displaying what appeared to be financial records. Across from her sat Marcus Webb, former HOA board member and current pariah, sipping coffee from a mug that read, "World's Most Mediocre Dad." "You realize they kicked me off the board too, right?" Marcus said, scrolling through a spreadsheet. "Apparently, missing one meeting to attend my daughter's graduation makes me unreliable." Karen barely heard him. She was staring at the screen, watching numbers that didn't add up. "Marcus, look at this. The Community Maintenance Fund. It's supposed to have $50,000, but the expenditures only account for $12,000. Maybe they're saving for a big project." "Like what? A golden fountain?" "Marcus, someone's been skimming money." It had been 3 days since Karen's removal from the HOA presidency. 3 days of sleeping in the guest room while Dave maintained a cold politeness that hurt worse than screaming. 3 days of neighbors crossing the street to avoid her and former friends declining her calls. Marcus had shown up at her door that morning with a proposition. Want to find out what really happened to the community budget. Now hunched over financial documents that Marcus had somehow obtained, Karen felt the familiar fire of righteous anger, but this time, it was focused on something real. "Janet Mueller signed off on all these expenditures," Karen said, pointing to the signatures. "But look at this, $23,000 for landscaping improvements to a company called Verde Solutions. Never heard of them." "That's because they don't exist." Karen's fingers flew over the keyboard. "No business license, no website, no reviews. But guess what? Verde Solutions' registered address is..." She paused dramatically. "Janet Mueller's home office." Marcus nearly choked on his coffee. "Holy shit, Karen. Janet's been embezzling from the HOA? It gets better. Look at this payment to Security Consultants LLC for $15,000. Same fake address." They sat in silence for a moment, absorbing the implications. Janet Mueller, the prim and proper board secretary who'd sanctimoniously voted for Karen's removal, was a thief. "We need to take this to the police," Marcus said. "No." Karen's voice was sharp. "We need proof. Real proof. And we need to be smart about this." "Karen." Marcus looked uncomfortable. "I know you're angry about being removed, but this isn't about revenge, right? This is about doing the right thing?" Karen met his eyes. For months, she'd been so focused on perceived slights and minor infractions that she'd missed the real crime happening under her nose. The irony wasn't lost on her. "It's about the community," she said quietly. For the first time in months, it's actually about the community. They spent the next hour mapping out Janet's financial crimes. The pattern was clear. Small amounts siphoned off regularly, disguised as legitimate expenses. Over 2 years, she'd stolen nearly $40,000 from the HOA fund. "How did you get these documents?" Karen asked suddenly. Marcus looked sheepish. "My ex-wife works for the management company. She's been worried about the discrepancies for months, but didn't know who to tell. And he just happened to know I was good with numbers." "I know you were good at finding problems," Marcus said. "I figured maybe it was time to point that talent at the right target." Karen's phone buzzed with a text from Dave. "Dinner's ready. Are you coming down?" She stared at the message, then at the evidence of real wrongdoing spread across her table. For the first time in months, she had a legitimate reason to be angry, a real injustice to fight. "Marcus," she said, closing the laptop, "how do you feel about a little breaking and entering?" He raised an eyebrow. "Karen, you just got out of jail. I'm not talking about committing crimes," she said, though her smile was predatory. "I'm talking about attending tomorrow night's board meeting. The one where Janet thinks she's going to quietly appoint her own replacement as president. They banned you from HOA meetings. They banned me from HOA meetings as a resident. But there's nothing stopping me from attending as a concerned citizen with information about financial crimes." Marcus grinned. "You're going to ambush them." "I'm going to give them a chance to do the right thing," Karen corrected. "And if they don't..." She didn't finish the sentence, but Marcus understood. Karen Middleton was back in the game, and this time, she was playing for keeps. The Hamilton County Jail's holding cell smelled like disinfectant and desperation, but Karen Middleton had never felt more righteous. Her wet hair had dried into an uncharacteristic mess, and her mascara had settled into permanent raccoon rings. But she sat ramrod straight on the metal bench, scrolling through her phone with the intensity of a day trader. 237 comments, she muttered, refreshing her Facebook Live video for the 15th time. And counting. The video had gone viral in their small suburban community. Half the comments supported her. Finally, someone standing up to these entitled homeowners, while the other half called for her resignation. But Karen only saw the supporters. "Ma'am," said Deputy Williams, a young woman with kind eyes and infinite patience, "your bail hearing is in an hour. Is there someone you'd like to call?" Karen looked up from her phone. "I want to call Channel 7 News. This is a story of government overreach and one woman's fight for justice." "Ma'am, you threw pool water at a police officer. I defended community standards." Karen's voice echoed off the concrete walls. "Do you know what happens to property values when people stop caring about pool maintenance?" Deputy Williams had heard stranger things in her 3 years on the job, but something about Karen's complete conviction made her pause. "Why don't you tell me about your neighborhood?" It was the first time in months anyone had asked Karen to explain rather than defend. She found herself talking about the pristine streets of Willowbrook Estates, the way the community had been when she'd first moved in 15 years ago. How the HOA had been just a friendly group that organized holiday parties and maintained the common areas. "When did it change?" Deputy Williams asked, genuinely curious. Karen hesitated. The truth was complicated. It had started when the Patels moved in next door and painted their front door navy instead of the approved forest green. Such a small thing, really. But then the Johnsons let their grass grow to 3 inches instead of the required 2.5, and the Hendersons started hosting pool parties that went past 10 p.m. People stopped caring, Karen said finally. Someone had to take a stand. But even as she said it, she could hear how hollow it sounded. Her phone buzzed with another Facebook notification, and she saw her husband Dave's name in the comments. "Karen, please come home. We need to talk." She'd been so focused on her crusade that she'd barely noticed Dave's increasing distance. When was the last time they'd had dinner together? When had he stopped asking about her day? "Mrs. Middleton," Deputy Williams said gently, "have you considered that maybe you're fighting the wrong battle?" Before Karen could respond, her lawyer arrived, a harried-looking woman named Patricia Chen, who'd been handling HOA disputes for 20 years. "Karen, what the hell were you thinking?" Patricia asked, settling into the plastic chair across from her. "Assault on a police officer. Trespassing? Do you want to lose your house?" "I want to save my neighborhood," Karen replied, but her voice lacked its usual fire. Patricia spread out a folder of papers. "The Hendersons are pressing charges. The HOA board is calling an emergency meeting tonight to discuss your removal. And Dave," she paused. "Dave is talking about separation." The words hit Karen like a physical blow. She'd been so focused on external threats that she'd missed the real danger, the slow dissolution of her own life. "He can't," she whispered. "We've been married for 18 years. He says you've become someone he doesn't recognize, Patricia said. Karen, you need help. Real help. Not legal help. Psychological help. Karen's phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from her sister. Saw the video. Mom's crying. Call me. For the first time in months, Karen Middleton felt truly alone. It's complicated, Janet stammered. I was going to pay it back. I had some personal financial difficulties, and I just needed. You needed to steal from your neighbors, Karen said, her voice steel. While you were voting to remove me for enforcing pool regulations, you were literally stealing money from the community fund. The crowd erupted in angry voices. Someone shouted, "Call the police," while others demanded Janet's immediate resignation. I'm calling the police, said Officer Martinez, who'd been attending the meeting out of professional interest, and I'm placing you under arrest for embezzlement. As Janet was led away in handcuffs, Karen felt a strange mix of vindication and emptiness. She'd been right about corruption in the HOA, but she'd been wrong about almost everything else. Karen, Dave appeared at her elbow. Can we talk? They walked outside into the cool evening air. The parking lot was buzzing with neighbors discussing the night's revelations. I'm sorry, Karen said before Dave could speak. I'm sorry I became someone you didn't recognize. I'm sorry I put the HOA above our marriage. I'm sorry I forgot what really mattered. Dave was quiet for a long moment. You found the real problem tonight, he said finally. But it took you 6 months of fighting fake problems to get there. I know. Karen looked back at the community center. I think I need help. Professional help. I think you're right. Dave's voice was gentle. But Karen, tonight you did something important. You protected the community from real harm. As they walked to their cars, Karen's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Emergency board meeting tomorrow to discuss new leadership. Interested in running for president again? Karen looked at the message, then at Dave, then at the neighborhood she'd nearly destroyed in her attempt to save it. No, she typed back. But I'm interested in helping whoever does it right. She hit send and put her phone away. For the first time in months, Karen Middleton felt like she was exactly where she belonged, not as a crusader or a victim, but as a neighbor who'd learned the difference between fighting for the community and fighting with it. But as she drove home, she couldn't shake the feeling that Janet Mueller's arrest was just the beginning. Something in the way Marcus had smiled when she declined his offer suggested he had other plans for her newfound investigative skills. The HOA wars might be over, but Karen's real work was just beginning.